So, would his name be Sauron the Gaslighter, or should it be Sauron the Candle Waxer? Ooh, that sounded way dirtier than I intended it to. Hello, interwebs! I hope you're all doing well, and I am here to review the latest episode of The Lord of the Power of the Rings of The Lord of the Power Rings, Season 2, Episode 7, titled Doomed to Die. Doomed, I say! Doomed! Doomed! Alright, now that I've lost everyone who clicked off this video who found me annoying, let's actually get into this episode. Frankly, I'm gonna say this right up front. I've had a rough week this week, so I may have watched this episode a little less than sober because this show is just my comfort show, and I kind of needed to just wrap myself in the warm blanket of this show. And I knew this was going to be a big episode, one that I was definitely going to enjoy. So just know that if I missed something in this review, it's because I was deeply enjoying this episode, and I think that that's what I have to say about this episode overall. This, quite frankly, might just be the best episode of the series. It does not make it a masterpiece. I still have issues with this episode that are indicative of my larger issues with this show as a critic, but as just someone who, again, as I said, finds the show to be my comfort blanket show, this one really did just hit me, and I had a lot of fun with it, and you can see all of the filmmaking elements, all the technical aspects of this series on full display here. And also, the best part of this episode, and what makes it so work so much for me beyond just the big spectacle battle of it, is that it cuts out all of the storylines that have been the weakest for me, namely the Stranger and the Harfoot stuff, as well as the Numenor plot, and just focuses on the elves, orcs, and dwarves, which have been the strongest things with this show since episode 1, and really allows some of those stories to hit a really grand climax that I just found to be emotionally affecting. Again, still gonna have my quibbles that we're gonna get into in a second, but quite frankly, on the whole, this was really, really good. No, Cisco's baseball, no! I have no idea where Cisco's baseball went. I'll find that after this. Let's start off with the strongest positive of this episode, which is the Celebrimbor Anatar plot. What a wonderful, wonderful acting job by both actors in this episode, but particularly Celebrimbor. I've spoken before in other episode reviews of the sense of tragedy that you feel with this storyline, especially if you know where things are going to go for Celebrimbor, and you really just feel that here. The scenes where Celebrimbor is essentially finding out that he's stuck in the Matrix, see, right down to like seeing the mouse repeat over and over and over again, like a deja vu cat, were particularly good, and you got that sense of manicness to Celebrimbor that you would buy, of like his mind has kind of been like just under the influence of Sauron for so long. The fact that he is kind of probably like physically drained, but doesn't even realize it, and pushing himself because he's in this sort of Matrix looking world, and the visuals where he like sees the missing stones, or like sees himself in the mirror and just catches these glimpses of his true self. I found them to be really affecting, especially as we all build to the ultimate reveal where he sees what's going on and he has that breakdown. I thought was really, really wonderful. And then the moment that like actually did break my heart, and I was kind of surprised that it did, was the moment where he confronts Sauron in front of the rest of the elves of Eregion, and he fails in proving to them that it's Sauron. And when he sort of like, when the one woman tries to go and comfort him, Sauron shoves her off and makes it look like it was Celebrimbor. And man, that sort of stuff, that sort of storytelling always gets me emotionally for very personal reasons. I won't go deep into my own personal life, but like those storylines work very well for me, and they can easily ride the line of me being very frustrated, because I get very frustrated with storylines where like people are miscommunicating, or like a thing happens and people misread it. But the way they have built up Sauron's ability to manipulate this woman, to get her to just make that move, and he just tosses her, like you feel like there's this relationship that he's going to use to manipulate her, and all he does is just to throw her overboard to get killed at an opportune moment for him. Was it really just showcased the the cruelty of Sauron in a storyline that can easily not have worked for me, and I think landed very well, and again built that tragedy. But I think what ultimately I think was the best scene in this entire storyline for me was Sauron and Anatar slash Sauron, Sauron and Anatar, Sauron and Celebrimbor, excuse me, talking to each other. And they just had this really long conversation, and Sauron kind of talks about like, oh, I feel bad because I am treating you the way Morgoth treated me. I'm treating you the same way Morgoth treated me, and him going on about like Morgoth didn't see the same end as I did. Like, I've always seen the end so clearly, but he didn't see the same one. And it just goes to show, like, he frames everything that he talks about as an inevitability, as an end. Like, he's seen it, he foresaw it. And yet he also understands that that's not really the case, that there are people who have different ideas of the way Middle-earth should go. And it just underlies just those subtle wordings and the way he frames things, just his perspective. It underscores his hypocrisy. And also just, I love when Celebrimbor points out, it's like, you are really the great deceiver. You can even deceive yourself. Like, it's a bit on the nose line. Like, even before he said it, I was like, he's going to say that. But it worked. Again, it worked for me and highlighted their relationship. And then when we come back at the end of this, where Galadriel comes in and sort of talks with him, I liked the underscoring of their shared relationship, where we've seen earlier in the season Galadriel sort of talking with Gil, the lad, about how Sauron sort of takes what she wanted from him, and manipulated it and gave it to her in a way that sort of benefited him. And Celebrimbor is the same way. He wanted a partner. He wanted someone to back him up in what he was doing with the rings, and so he chose not to believe that Anatar was Sauron. And I like that way of viewing Sauron as someone who's just feeding your own ego, feeding your own desires, and that's how he manipulates you. And I thought that tragedy was really well placed. But this is going to slide me over into some more of my criticisms, because we do have this like really great speech that I liked from Celebrimbor about like how the ways we will be evil, the darkness, is not with strength, but with light. And I think that was a strong theme here, but it didn't land as hard because it felt a little bit nebulous from a lot of the stuff that was going on. However, there was one moment that I did think landed really well. But I do think that speech, while nice and feels like it was reaching for something Tolkien-esque, felt a little bit too nebulous. Like, I think what they were trying to reach for was something like the big speech, which is one of my favorite moments in Lord of the Rings, where Sam on Mount Doom falls and looks up at the sky and sees the star, and he says like, oh, there's always light beyond what evil can touch. And that is a very, again, metaphorical story, but it works much better given the emotional state and where they physically are in Mordor at that moment, near the end of all things, potentially. And so that it lands a little bit stronger for me in that context than it did here with Celebrimbor. But still a good speech generally, if not reaching the heights of what Tolkien would write. But that's a very high bar to land on. Another strong positive for me is Elrond and Durin getting some scenes together. I spoke about that way back in my reviews of season 1, that Elrond and Durin were easily the strongest part of the show for me, like bar none. Like, there was no real question of that. Like, their emotional connection built the show for me in a lot of ways in season 1. And here, this season, we haven't gotten a lot with them. So to finally see them come back together, and we get this really emotionally resonant discussion between them about like, hey, I'm about to overthrow my father, I've been dealing with a lot, and them being able to connect was a sense of relief that built into the tragedy later this episode, because you see Durin wanting to go help his friend, really caring about him, building his army to go and do it, and even sort of like getting the doors behind him over his father, but then having to be drawn back because of his father's corruption and possibly hitting the Balrog. And then you hit this moment on the battlefield where Elrond is expecting Durin to show up. And they frame it, and I loved this, they frame it in kind of the same way as the riders of Rohan appearing at Helm's Deep, of this light coming in. And it's the first light of dawn. Durin's going to show up. He's going to be there and save them all. And he doesn't, because of Sauron's manipulation, how effectively he's done it over the past few episodes to the Dwarven Kingdom with the ring. It's a subversion of that same moment from The Lord of the Rings in a way that, again, frames around the theme of light, as we were talking about a moment ago. And Elrond just seeing that Durin will come and just having this like, I can't fight anymore, and I believe my friend will come, and he's not. And it was just, it did that really, 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 really hit. And I think that was just a really great use of that, probably the strongest relationship in the show, for an emotional gut punch that just landed super well. Let's get into some of my more specific negatives, though. Visually, the battle was stunning, and there were some really great visual moments. And also, sorry, I will get to the negative in a minute, but just to do the like outrage merchants watch here for a second. Critical Drinker tweeted. Sorry, I apologize that I do this in these videos, but like it bugs me how they read this show so much in other shows, and I'm just like, I'm utterly fascinated by it. But like, Critical Drinker tweeted a picture where he said like, oh, look at this shot where there's light on one side and dark on the other side. Ooh, I'm glad the sun just like framed it perfectly. I'm like, that's visual symbolism. It's like, this world is magic, number one, and that's Tolkien. And like, literally the Battle of Helm's Deep used light and dark on the sides. It's a thing in Tolkien. Like, it's just, there are criticisms to make about this show, but they never make the good ones, and it frustrates me. Anywho, they always go for the lazy, easy ones. Anyways, that's a whole different discussion. Sorry to bring that up, but it always pops in my mind. I'm like, like, if you want to critique the show, there are better ways to do it, but I know they're grifting to sell their hegemonic view of the world. That's a whole other discussion. Anywho, let's get into the actual criticisms that I have. Well, it was visually stunning, and there's some great visual moments, especially with some of the battle stuff, like Arondir kicking butt, some of the elves that get killed. Like with the arrows and stuff, wonderful, like, looked stunning. However, unlike I think some of the better battles of Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy, this battle just, the strategy and the sense of place and geography really doesn't work for me. And this is a problem that I see with a lot of television battles, and a lot of battles generally in like big blockbuster movies. If you're gonna do a big battle scene, really set us the stakes of what the actual location is. Battle strategy, like good battle strategy, is built on like knowing the terrain, knowing what tools you have, how to effectively use your men. And Tolkien, I think when he was writing Lord of the Rings, and you see that in Peter Jackson's trilogy, knew that very well. Like Helm's Deep was this sort of place like backed up against the mountain. You have like ways that people can come in. There's the bridge, the one door that people can get into. There's the place that they bomb and the walls of Helm's Deep at one point with the guy with the torch. Like, you get a sense of the space and the terrain, and that allows you to feed into how the battle is built. But then nowadays we get these like MCU big bland CGI battlefields that armies just run at each other and bash at each other, and we get little snippets across the battlefield on CGI Wasteland where there's no distinct landmarks. Here it is not that bad. It is not like Avengers Endgame or whatever level of bad in terms of that depiction. But it is not the strongest, and there's just weird moments of strategy that are strange to me, like when the orcs sort of leave the mud when the horses come, and I'm like, the horses are one of the elves' strengths over the orcs right now, and you would negate that by putting them in the mud, and they don't do that, and so it's just like those moments of strategy. I just wish this show had taken more time to like really fine-tooth comb go over the strategy of the episode and make the battle feel really meaty in those aspects of using the terrain. That said, I did mention there's some wonderful moments. I did want to point out one particular moment where Elrond is fighting and his horse gets killed, and then he like just kills that orc and throws him in the siege weapon. Was pretty badass, and I did like that Elrond takes a moment to sort of mourn his horse. Like, again, very Tolkien-esque moment, especially considering that horses in this world are kind of sentient and also divine in some senses, in some ways. I mean, think of Shadowfax as well. So that landed as well. Storylines that were a little bit more mixed for me here, as we have Adar and some moments with Elrond and Galadriel. I'm sure some people are going to balk at the Elrond-Galadriel kiss, and I certainly watched them like, I didn't read these two as romantic. I read them as like besties. But I liked that that was used as a moment to distract Adar from the fact that Elrond was helping her get out. So that frankly, that was like, okay, that works better for me. Weird fake out, and I'm sure pissed off some people instantly. But it did come around in the end to work. The rest of the stuff with Adar, I just wish. There's so much I like about the storyline. As I've said before in other reviews, I really do like the humanizing of the orcs and that they have differing perspectives and even some perspectives that rival Adar's. Like we get that one guy who sort of leaves the battle at one point. And I really also like Adar's line of, someone says, "I thought you loved us," and he says, "As much as my heart can," or something along those lines. And so it's sort of going towards like Adar being like, I'm not fully a person and I can't really feel all the way anymore. I'm sort of like stuck in this vengeance quest, but I do care for you. And the scene where they have like a burial pyre for the orcs as well, led by Adar. I did like those moments, but again, as I said last episode and sort of reiterated here, Adar's plan just doesn't fully work for me because in the sense that like he knows that this kind of benefits Sauron because this is Sauron's plan in the beginning. Halbrand was the one that wanted him to attack Eregion. So it's just weird to me, and it kind of gets reiterated here a few times. So it doesn't hit as hard as I wish it would, as much as I really like Adar a lot. Also, we get Arondir showing up, and he gets to do some badass elf stuff, which I love. But again, his storyline has never been one I've been particularly fascinated in. His vengeance quest against Adar for the death of his lover also doesn't really land for me because I never cared about her character all that much too, and she died in between seasons in a kind of lame, like, well, the actress left sort of way. So him getting a moment with Adar at the end, and possibly dying at the end there too, we'll see if that sticks. I'm just sort of like, man, if he does die, what a waste. And even if he doesn't die, like, I'm just not invested in his storyline. So I'm hoping that they eventually take him somewhere more interesting in season 3, because it feels like they had to saddle him with this quest because it was like, well, he doesn't have the actress that he would normally be bouncing off of anymore, and he's kind of separated from all the rest of the story. So hopefully by next season he can kind of be set up to be in a place where he can kind of do something more interesting if he lives. Or maybe they just start taking this opportunity to get rid of him and just sort of be like, well, he's dead now. You don't have to worry about him. I feel like that would be such a waste, but frankly, they've been kind of wasting him anyways, so the only other thing that I really want to mention here is we get that sort of big troll sequence at the end. Love that. That was very, very fun. It was cool to see the big CGI troll guy. And I did like that the orcs were like, well, he would murder us too. So it's kind of dangerous to use him. Like, I like that as an idea. I honestly wish we had gotten more out of that as a concept of like, we have this troll, it will kick ass and probably blow up Eregion's wall for us, but also will hurt us as well. Like, that's just a cool concept that gets only passing kind of mention. But it does lead to one amazing thing, which is like the orc heavy metal song that hit the end credits here by Bear McCreary. That song actually released before the season came out, and I've been listening to it a lot. Like, it's so good, and I was kind of sad that it wasn't played in context of the show and just in the after credit sequence, but it's still fantastic and just a baller way to end the episode. So frankly, that does land. I just thought that was really cool. So Bear McCreary just killing it as per usual with this show. Again, like I said, I watched this a little less than sober, so I'm sure I missed something or other in there. We get Galadriel trying to escape. Again, worked fine. Yeah, I can't particularly think of anything else that comes immediately to my mind. Leave in the comments if there was something that I missed that you want me to talk about, because I'll bring it up in the season finale next week. But again, just to wrap this out, I think this was the strongest episode of the show, mainly because the battle was really fun. The storylines that I focused on were the show's strongest. Some stunning visuals and some great character beats. But again, still labored with some of the problems of the show, with unclear motivations, unclear sort of terrain and battle strategy, and some moments that feel a little bit too nebulous rather than concrete in a way that doesn't make it emotionally hit as strong as it possibly could. So yeah, still some of the show's major problems, but still I think it's really, this is strong stuff. I wish this had been what the show had been from season 1. And again, it's my comfort blanket show personally. Like I can, as a critic, I can turn a critical eye to it and be like, here are the problems. But as just a person who sits down and enjoys a TV show, it feels like a warm blanket show. And I do really kind of just enjoy it on that level. And yeah, I'd love to hear all your thoughts down in the comments below. What do you think of this one? And I'll see you all next week. As always, my friends, live long and prosper.